You're listening to the Better Relationships After Baby podcast, where I believe things can actually be better than ever after having kids. But it takes intentional conversation, personal growth, and community to get there. I'm Chelsea Skaggs, life and relationship coach, fellow mom and wife, and lover of taboo topics. I'm here to give you insight, practical tools, and conversations to help your relationships survive and thrive through the big changes of parenthood. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to another week of Better Relationships After Baby podcast. I am your host, Chelsea Skaggs, life and relationship coach, here to help you enjoy more of the life that you have built with your partner and the life you continue to build together. And today we're going to be talking about a part of that life that takes up, on average, like a third of your life. A lot less sometimes when you're in the trenches of early parenthood. But we're going to be talking about sleep and how sleep impacts the whole family. And hopefully by the end of today's episode, you'll be able to exhale and relax your shoulders a little bit and not just feel so anxious and wound up and overwhelmed by the concept of sleep. So I am joined today by Alexa Lee. And Alexa, I'm going to ask you to just share, the overview, who you are, a little bit about your family, the kind of work you do that brings us to having this conversation today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Chelsea. I'm really excited to talk with you today. So my name's Alexa Lee. I'm a child sleep consultant, and I've worked in early childhood, since 2013, so a while. And when I was working in early childhood as a preschool teacher and as a nanny, I had a lot of children who really struggled to sleep, and their parents would ask us, I don't know what to do. They're waking up in the middle of the night. They went to bed at 2 a.m. last night. I don't know what to do. And we just kind of said, I don't know, wish you luck, talk to a pediatrician. We didn't really have a great answer. And then as I was working as a nanny, my nanny family got recommended to a sleep consultant. And they said, we're having a terrible time getting our daughter to sleep. I was holding the 6-month-old baby all day for her nap. Mom was holding her and breastfeeding her all night for nighttime sleep, and it was just a whole situation. And I was so grateful that we had found a professional who could guide us through this experience. And really, within a week, things were already a lot better. And within 2 weeks, she was sleeping through the night, and she was taking really solid naps, and just put her in the crib and walked away, and she just drifted off to sleep really peacefully. And I was just so moved by that experience. I was like, I have to do this. I have to help more people. Like, this is amazing. So then I got into sleep consulting, and now that's what I do for a living. So now I offer families support to solve their children's sleep issues. I work with children ages 4 months all the way up to 6 years. So infants, toddlers, kindergartners, first graders, the whole gamut. So all my work is fully remote. I don't need to come to your house for this to be effective. And everything that I do is based on developmentally appropriate practice. So I do a lot of parent education about what's reasonable to expect from your child's sleep at this age. How can we best support them in getting good quality sleep? And I also talk a lot about the science of sleep. So we're working with your child's brain instead of against it.
Oh, okay. I love that personal story and journey into that work. And I have obviously lots of questions for you, but as
Yeah.
you think back to that family that you were working with,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what that was like for you to see the shift in the family. Like, how did
Yeah.
improving sleep, obviously, I'm always talking about the relationship, the marriage, all of that. How did you see that impact the couple and the family as a whole?
Yeah. So the biggest change that I noticed was that as soon as they had a plan in place, I could just see that everybody just felt more relaxed. I was spending all day researching different sleep strategies and plans, and the mom was up at night at 3 a.m, on YouTube looking up what we did to fix our baby's sleep. And so we were all kind of doing the same, like searching for information.
Mm-hmm.
And once we had a plan in place and we had a professional telling us, like, this is what we're going to do and this is the process, it was such a huge relief. You just felt this like, oh, like, thank
Mm.
God, we know what we're going to do. It's going to be okay. And then most sleep consultants, including the one that I worked with, and this is true for myself as well, we talk to our clients every day as they work through the process.
Hmm.
So if something isn't working, like you have someone there that you can talk to, which is different than if you're looking for information, on social media or on the internet, or you buy a book, and you try what they suggest, and the first night seems really rough. There isn't like a 1-800 number you can call. Like, this didn't work. Or like, is this supposed to go like this? Or this is harder than I thought it would be, and I'm not sure what I should do now. Or, it's day 5 and naps are still really rough. Is that okay? So having that professional there to answer questions in real time was just such a game changer. It was huge. So that was really nice. And then, I mean, the parents also told me, it's just so nice to actually have evenings together again. Like they started asking me to do evening babysitting for date nights, which they had been so afraid to do that because they
Yep.
couldn't leave their babies, for even a couple of hours. So it was just really, really lovely. And then even for me as a nanny during the day, I mean, I had my arms down,
Makes sense. Yes.
So, and it was hard being a childcare provider and not knowing the answer to this really basic question. So, now I know that, if a family is struggling with breastfeeding, I refer them to a lactation consultant.
Yeah.
If a family is struggling with having solids, I would refer them to an occupational therapist or a feeding specialist. And now I know that if a family's having a hard time with sleep, they're a sleep consultant. And
Yeah.
these people are professionals and they're wonderful, and, they can guide you through the process. And, parents don't have to deal with this alone anymore.
Yeah. Great. Well, I know there's a lot of like just myths and misconceptions. And I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the difference between having someone to check in with versus like
Right,
being on Instagram at 2 a.m.
right,
trying to find an answer. What
right,
kind of myths and misconceptions do you hear? Do you see? And
right.
how's that, impacting parents?
Right, absolutely. So a big one that I hear a lot is, well, my kid's just a bad sleeper. My kid's just bad at sleep. I was bad at sleep. He's just not going to learn to sleep. And this is not really an accurate portrayal of how human beings sleep. So sleep is a basic need. We all need sleep in order to survive. We really struggle to thrive without adequate sleep. And some children do need more support than others, but that's not the same thing as not being capable of learning to sleep. And really, every child is capable of getting really high quality sleep and high quality daytime. So that's the first one. And then a second one that I hear a lot is, well, my kids are little, nobody gets sleep when their kids are little. This is what it is. This is normal. Come on. Like all kids wake up at 3 a.m. That's normal. And I think it's important to recognize the difference between something being normal and something being inevitable. So, lots of things are normal in childhood, like fighting, hair pulling, throwing toys, sibling conflicts, all kinds of things. But just because it's normal and it happens to a lot of people doesn't mean that it's inevitable and it has to happen and you just have to suffer through it. There's nothing that you can do. And sleep issues are one of those things. They're very normal. It doesn't mean that there's something pathological, or wrong with your child or that you've done something wrong, but it's also really fixable. And we have the science and the strategies to fix these issues. And then the third myth that I run into a lot is this idea that somehow addressing your child's sleep issues hurts them or could be bad for them in some way. And this is not accurate. So, there is going to be struggle. This is going to be a challenge. Anytime we're solving a problem, we're going to be working hard, we're going to be working together. And children do often express big emotions when they're working on something, especially if they're learning a new skill, like learning to sleep by themselves, or they're learning to fall asleep. And that's okay. We're going to be there for them. We're going to support them through this process. We're not going to be traumatizing them. We're not doing something that's going to be harmful in some way. And the child will really benefit in the long run. There's really a lot of research that shows that children who get adequate sleep do better in school, they're more social, they have less problematic behaviors, they're less likely to be diagnosed with ADD and other problems. So it's really a positive choice that parents are making in the long run when they decide to prioritize children.
Yeah. I'm like thinking, obviously, thinking back to my two experiences, which were very different. But that first, like,
Yeah.
I don't actually know that I ever got over thinking that my child was just a bad sleeper. Like,
Yeah.
we never got to good, consistent naps,
Yeah.
long stretches at night. And to
Hmm.
some degree, I can still, like, he's just an intense child. And we look back and we're like, oh yeah, all of this tracks. Um, but I just wonder for myself what that would have been like to have more personal support versus like the amount of times I sat up. I'm like picturing, my kitchen table at 2 a.m. Like, what the hell can I try? And then I tried something for a couple days and that was too hard. And then something else for a couple days that didn't work. Um, and I wonder what it's like for you on the like you're working with people's emotions, like you're working with people's very, very tender spot, and I know because when I'm working with couples, like sleep is a huge topic that comes up. It causes arguments, and lack of sleep intensifies arguments. So maybe just as like a point of normalization for
Hmm.
listeners, what kinds of feelings and emotions and experiences do you see in people when they're kind of maybe they're at their wits' end, or maybe they're being really proactive and they're not there yet.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
what kinds of things do you like see and hear and hold in those spaces?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of family conflict between parents, when the child is struggling with sleep. Obviously, we all care about our children. We all want them to get high quality sleep, right? And, when your child isn't sleeping or is having a hard time sleeping, it's just a really fertile ground for a lot of conflict, a lot of arguments, and also a lot of feelings of guilt and shame and confusion. I worked with one mom who was a newborn care specialist, and she told me, I feel so bad that I can't do this for my own child. I take care of other people's children for a living, and I can't help my own child get enough sleep. And what does that say about me? And always really assure parents, over and over and over again, this is not a condemnation of you. This is not a sign that you don't know what you're doing, or that you're missing something. Really, it's just a sign that they need a little bit of support, and that's not a problem, right? Just like seeing a therapist or
Yeah.
seeing a relationship coach isn't
Yeah.
a sign that you and your to be together. You just need a little
Right.
bit of help,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
Totally.
So, and then another one that I run into a lot is a lot of people have kind of outside parties telling them what should
Mhm.
be happening with their child's sleep. So I see a lot of, oh, well, my mom, said that XYZ was happening for us by the time our kids were this age or whatever. Or, my father-in-law says that, we definitely can't do ABC.
Yeah.
So I also do a lot of communication. I always bring in those extra parties, let's get the whole family involved, bring the
Mhm.
nanny in, if the daycare worker wants to chat, if grandma wants to chat, let's get everybody on the same page. And I found that really once everybody's kind of in the same room together or on the same Zoom call, and we can just be honest about how we're feeling and really talk through those things, inevitably those conflicts dissipate pretty quickly. So much of this is kind of like, you're talking at 3 a.m. and going, well, I think we should do this. Well,
Mhm.
my mom said that we should do this. And once you have a plan in place and you have everybody on the same
Yeah.
page, a lot of those conflicts go away, which is really nice.
Totally. Yeah. That was such an important thing. Like when you have a plan, you can be on the same team.
Yeah,
You're,
yeah,
there's less conflict, there's less finger pointing. You know what the foundation is that you're kind
yeah.
of both working from.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely something that I really recommend. Ideally, that everybody do is sit down with your partner or with your other family members or
Yeah.
with your child care provider, and just talk about this is the problem that we're having with the child's sleep. These are our goals. This is what we're hoping to get them to do, and this is the plan that we
Mhm.
have. And talk about what are some strategies that we feel comfortable implementing,
Yeah.
and then and just suggest it. And ideally put it down on paper, either, on the Notes app on your phone or on Google Docs or just on a plain old piece of paper so that people can go back to that plan to reference it.
Yeah.
And it's not this amorphous, well, I think you said that we were going to do this. If we have it written down, I can refer back to it. I know exactly what we're going to do. And then also record the child's sleep every day, writing down on a Google Doc, on the Notes app, on a piece of paper, writing down the time they fell asleep, how long it took them to fall asleep, when they woke up, what they did when they woke up, and the same thing for daytime as well. Because again, there's a lot of confusion, and well, I thought you said that the first nap was an hour and a half. No, it was only 45 minutes. Once it's written down, you can refer back to that. And also, it is really gratifying to see that change happen. It's actually documented. Oh, look, by day 4, she really was sleeping through the night. It was hard, but we did it. And look, I can see right here that there was changes coming, and this isn't all for fun.
Yes. Okay. What I love about that is it kind of takes the emotional driven pieces out of it and you're just working with information.
Yeah.
Something I tell my clients a lot is that they kind of have to figure out how they have a working business relationship that's not so sexy, it's not so emotional, it's logistical, but it leads to having a better emotional and just satisfactory connection. But that is the power of planning and being proactive and having a system. As you were saying that, I was thinking, okay, so someone wants to have a plan, but we don't go into this knowing how babies even sleep or what all of these different developmental milestones are. So can you explain a little about, I think you called it biomechanics, which I was like, oh, I first just need to know what that word even means. And then can you tell us about it around babies and children's sleep?
Yeah. So the biomechanics of sleep, it's the biological processes of how these things work, right? There's a certain process that happens when our brains sleep, and there's certain things that can make that easier, and there's things that can make it harder. So when we fall asleep, we go through these sleep cycles, roughly once an hour, once every 45 minutes or so. Sleep cycles are slightly shorter in children; they're about 45 minutes, and they're slightly longer in adults. Adults have sleep cycles that are closer to an hour. So you initially fall asleep, you enter a phase of really deep sleep where you're not really moving and you're not dreaming. It's very physically restorative. And then that lasts for, 15 minutes to 30 minutes. And then you move into REM sleep, which is also called light sleep. And that's when you have all of your dreams and you tend to move more. You tend to be more physically active while you're asleep. And then at the very end of your sleep cycle, we actually all wake up really briefly for a period of 30 seconds or so, maybe a minute. And you're kind of not really totally awake, but it might look like you're awake. And that's the time where if you're an adult, you need to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. You'll get up and do that and then return back to sleep. And as adults, we generally don't remember this period of waking up. For the most part, we just roll back over and go right back to sleep, and we don't remember it at all. But for young children, they really have to actively work to start that next sleep cycle. So if they're overtired, their little brains just have such a hard time doing it. And they're just like, oh my goodness, I can't do it. This is so hard. So young children actually sleep best when they're already well rested. So if they're well rested when they fall asleep, it's really easy for them to connect those sleep cycles. If they're overtired when they fall asleep, it gets harder and harder and harder. And that's when you start seeing them waking up, every 45 minutes or waking up every hour. It's because they're struggling to connect sleep cycles. So if we can help them catch up on sleep, sleep gets easier and easier and easier. It's like a positive feedback loop. It just gets better.
Okay, you just made sleep sound so fun.
Isn't it cool?
It is. I'm like, oh, now I just want to listen to a book about the biomechanics of sleep.
Favorite topic. Sleep is so fascinating for young children. It's so different from how we sleep as adults. So with adults, if we are really exhausted at the end of the day, if you've had a crazy week or a really crazy day and you get in the bed and you pass out, you're going to sleep like the dead. Right? So, you'll wake up in the morning and be like, whoa, like I slept so solidly. That was great, man. I really needed that. That was really good sleep. For young children, it's the opposite.
Mm.
If they're so tired that they're just like hitting the mat and becoming unconscious, their sleep is going to be terrible and they're going to be waking up all the time. Totally, totally different. And that's true up through about puberty. About puberty, your brain starts to change and the sleep starts to look more like adult sleep.
Wow. Okay. I don't know. This was not a planned question. So, okay, if you're not sure, but like, do you know if there's like an evolutionary benefit? You do? Yay. Okay.
Yeah,
Like, why is it like this?
yeah. So there's just so much that happens in our brains when we're children. So we actually think that there's a critical period for learning to sleep, just like there's a critical period for social skills and for language. So if you can get really good sleep up until puberty, if you're a good sleeper during like up into those teen years, you're probably going to be a good sleeper as an adult. And then the reverse is also true.
Mm.
So when you talk to parents of adult children who are insomniacs, you say, your child is now 30 years old and they're going to the sleep clinic and saying they're insomniac. Tell us about their sleep as a child. A lot of those parents say, oh, they were a terrible sleeper as a child. They never got good sleep. And we think that's because the way your brain sleeps in childhood is it's kind of like if they're learning to do that. So it's very similar to language or social skills, where if you have really great language exposure and great social skills exposure, in childhood, you're going to do really well with that as an adult. And we think sleep is like that too.
Wow. Okay.
Cool.
Again, sleep is so cool. Um, so then are the signs of not getting enough sleep similar? Like I still have signs. My husband knows
Yeah.
when I have not had enough sleep, there are
Yeah.
signs.
Yes. Yes.
But what's
Absolutely.
going on in this for kids throughout their developmental stages?
Yeah. So the signs of overtiredness in children, it's really easy to confuse them for signs of being well rested, actually. So when children are overtired, they tend to wake up a lot. So if they're waking up at 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., they tend to refuse naps or take really, really short naps. So I would say if they're under 4 and they've stopped taking a daytime nap, they might be overtired. And also if their naps are less than an hour, that's also a sign of overtiredness. And then the last one that I see a lot is hyperactivity and power struggles, specifically around nap time and bedtime. So I hear a lot of parents say, there's no way my kid needs to take a nap. There's no way, because during that time, they're bouncing off the walls and going crazy. Or there's no way my child is ready for bed, at this time, because that's when they're running around the house like a madman, pulling hysterically. And that's actually overtiredness. So what happens when children sleep best, again, when they're well rested, so they start to get sleepy, they kind of find a place to lay down, they make it to their sleep environment, and in that situation, their brain just starts sleeping and they kind of peacefully drift off to sleep. But if they're not in that sleep environment, if they're not in their bed or in their crib, their brain kind of tells them, we can't sleep here. We need to stay awake. We're in the living room. We're playing outside, whatever is happening. We need to stay awake. So their brain floods them with cortisol and adrenaline to make them stay awake. And that sends them into a state of hyperactivity. And then you have more power struggles, you have more temper tantrums at bedtime, you have more meltdowns, and they'll often just refuse to nap entirely because their brain is like, we missed the beginning of the sleep wave. That's over. Now we're fighting sleep. And once you start fighting sleep, it gets even harder to fall asleep. So once the child is well rested, they generally sleep through the night for the most part. They'll take really long naps, over an hour. If they're down to one nap a day, that nap might be 2 or 3 hours. And they fall asleep happy and they wake up happy. So what that looks like as they're falling asleep, it might take them 15, 30 minutes to fall asleep. And they kind of talk to themselves and you'll hear them like singing in their crib, or if you have a video camera, you'll see them like playing with their hands or like playing with their little stuffed animal. And then they just kind of gradually get still and kind of gradually drift off to sleep. And that's what I call falling asleep happy. It's a sign that it's coming easily to them. It's not really, really hard for them. They're just kind of peacefully drifting off to sleep. And then they'll do the same thing when they wake up. So when children wake up and they feel well rested, they wake up pretty happy and they're pretty quiet for the most part. A lot of parents that I work with, once their child is well rested, I've heard them say things like, we haven't used an alarm clock since the child was born because they would just wake up and sleep.
Uh-huh.
Now, we wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and it turns out that they've been awake for 15 minutes and they're just kind of quietly playing in their crib. And that's because they feel well rested.
Wow. Okay. You're talking, I mean, the way that I have heard it is like sleep begets sleep or,
Yes.
well
Yes.
rested. Is there a turning point when at what point can you catch up on that versus is there a point where maybe it's too late to catch up and learn good sleep
Yeah.
and something else needs to be the approach for care?
Yeah. So for young children, usually sleep starts to improve, within a week or so. So I work with clients for 2 weeks. Sometimes I work with clients for 3 weeks, but for the most part, it's just a week process. So we'll see the biggest improvement in the first 3 to 5 days. And usually by the end of the second week, things are pretty solid. It might not be perfect, but it's pretty doable. So they'll be back to taking naps. And for the most part, they'll be sleeping through the night and sleeping until 6 to 8 o'clock in the morning, probably. And then for older children, so if you have a teenager or if you yourself as an adult are struggling with sleep, it's not that it's not possible to learn to sleep. It's just that there's different strategies that are helpful. So there are sleep consultants who work with adults and who work with teenagers, and I know some of them, and they're really, really wonderful people. It's a different process, and that's outside of the scope of my practice. But it's definitely still doable. Just like, if you struggled with language as a child and now you're trying to learn language as an adult, it's still doable. It's going to be a totally different process than if you were a child. But it's still fixable. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I do want to kind of bring us to a conclusion here. I've obviously just been like, what? Tell me more. Tell me more. In case I feel like everyone would be sold already on sleep is really important for the whole family, for the relationship. Maybe the reason I hate my husband so much right now is because I haven't gotten any sleep and this is really tense. So maybe I should prioritize this. But what is kind of your make a case for how sleep isn't just about sleep? But there's a lot of benefits to prioritizing that for your child and for your family.
Yes, absolutely. So I definitely see some knock-on effects of lack of sleep hurting the relationship in other areas and getting adequate sleep helping the relationship in other areas for sure. So a big one, and I think I talked about this earlier, is that couples tend to just have disagreements about the sleep. We want our kids to get enough sleep. If you're not sure what to do, there's a lot of arguing at 3 o'clock in the morning and debating, you should get him. No, we said that we were going to do this. Well, I think he needs to be fed. Well, maybe he needs a diaper. So those disagreements are just the whole thing in and of themselves. And once you address the sleep problems and once you have a plan in place, that's a lot easier. And then I also see the lack of sleep itself affecting the relationship in all these other areas and kind of creating ripple. So generally, if the child is not sleeping, usually one or both of the adults are also not sleeping, which is obviously a problem. So when the adults are not sleeping, obviously that impacts physical intimacy. It can be hard for the parents to physically find time to be alone and just talk to each other and just talk about, other problems that are happening in their relationship or other things that are going on. And it can be hard to find time, if you're spending multiple hours in the middle of the night or at bedtime trying to get the child to go to sleep. That can also impact our other self-care activities, like making time to see friends and making time to spend time with family, spending time on hobbies, doing all of those other things in addition to just getting enough sleep. It's also really, improves our physical and mental well-being. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Totally agree. Totally things that I obviously hear from my community too. Okay. So maybe last question. If a parent is listening and they're like, okay, well, but I am overwhelmed. Man, that sounds nice to not have 3 a.m. arguments.
Right.
Where do you tell people to even start, to get their head above water?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would do is just sit down with your partner and have a chat and, Ideally, do this when you're both well rested. Do this when hopefully people aren't totally exhausted. So, and just talk about what is the problem, what are our goals, what do we want the child's sleep to look like, and what are some strategies that we're comfortable pursuing in order to make that. So some resources that I really like for this are the book Healthy Sleep Habits, Happy Child by Dr. Mark Bluth. He really does a super deep dive into all the research on this stuff. It's really, really great. And there's a million other sleep accounts and other books and things as well that are also really helpful. So find, someone who resonates with you, a plan that sounds appealing for you, and just stick to it. And then the second thing that I recommend is checking to see if your hospital has infant sleep classes. A lot of hospitals these days offer classes on sleep that are also really helpful. So you can get, more information about other strategies, other approaches that might be helpful. And then the third thing that I recommend is having a developmentally appropriate sleep schedule. This is like the number one thing that's like so fixable and like you could do this. So a lot of parents don't realize that if their child, regardless of how overtired or how low rested their child is, they're probably going to wake up roughly at 6, 7, maybe 8 o'clock in the morning. And this is because children's little brains are hardwired to wake up when the sun comes up. So when the sun is up, they're going to pop up like a daisy. I'm sure you've heard this joke that children who go to bed early will wake up early, and children who go to bed late will also wake up very early.
Yeah. The math doesn't math, but it's true.
Yeah, so the reason that joke is true is because their brains are going to force them to be awake as soon as the sun comes up. And really, no matter where you are in the world, the sun comes up around 6 to 8 a.m., somewhere in that range. So given this, if you want your child to catch up on sleep, the best way to do that is to give them a really early bedtime. I would recommend a bedtime somewhere between 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., depending on how overtired they are. If they're really, really overtired, they really might need to be in bed for the night at 6 p.m. I would say definitely no later than 8 p.m. So, I work with a lot of parents who say, well, my mom said that, kids should be able to sleep till 10 o'clock. That's just not developmentally appropriate. Like this can happen. So
you just said that so much kinder than I would. Like, ma'am, that's not just not developmentally appropriate. And I'm like, Mom, I didn't ask for your opinion.
Yeah, it's definitely hard, having to break the news to people that unfortunately your child is not going to be happy if they stay up until 10 o'clock. There's just not. So, but that's the easiest thing that you can do tonight is an earlier bedtime. If they seem tired at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., just let them go to sleep. Yeah.
And for people thinking about that, I know, we're going to be releasing this at a time where it is starting to get darker a little bit earlier, but summer, that can be really hard because it's not getting dark until 9 o'clock. Are sleep aids or like making, blacking out the room, are those things appropriate to block the sunlight in the evenings?
Oh yeah. This is another one that I recommend is the consistent sleep environment.
Okay.
So having the child do all of their daytime naps and all of their nighttime sleep in the same environment, in a crib or in a bassinet or in a bed. With the lights off, with blackout shades drawn, regardless of what time of day or night it is, regardless of how bright or dark it is outside, and having a sound machine on.
Okay.
So that darkness will help their brain stimulate melatonin production and just generally helps them realize that it is time to sleep. And the great thing about a consistent sleep environment is we can create that dark room with the sound machine on. We can create that anywhere. We can have that at grandma's house. We can have that at daycare. We can have that in a hotel room. So really anywhere, anytime the child needs to sleep, we can put them in the dark room in a crib or bassinet with the sound machine on, and they'll be able to fall asleep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. Is there anything else that you haven't had the chance to share? And then when you feel, complete, you have passed on your wisdom to us for this episode.
Yeah.
Also, I would like you to let people know where they can find you, how they can connect with you if they are looking for answers and some peace in their sleep journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I think the like kind of final note that I would like to end on is that sleep really is attainable for everybody. This is not something that you have to wait until your child is in high school. This is not something where this is only available to the 1%. Really at every income range, at every age range, it really is possible for you and your child to get really high quality sleep. So, like I said, check out your local hospital for sleep classes. Don't be afraid to reach out to a professional. Don't be afraid to reach out to a sleep consultant. There's a lot of us.
Yeah.
And we really offer a range of supports, a range of different price packages to meet families where they're at. So, and hopefully, I'm hoping that one day we could get to a place where insurance companies are on board with this. I would love to be contracted with an insurance company,
Yeah.
so that this could be available for more people. But in the meantime, really, this is something that every family can do. It takes a little bit of communication. It does take that little bit of knowledge. You do have to sit down and have a chat and develop a plan. But it really is so doable for everybody. I really, really believe that.
Wonderful. Okay. How can someone find you and just say,
Yeah.
"Hey, Alexa, thank you so much for what you shared. It was so good to
Yeah.
learn."
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.alexaleesleep.net.
Great.
And you can also email me at alexalee.sleep@yahoo.com. And yeah, and I also do teach, if you're in the Pennsylvania area, I do teach infant sleep classes through UPMC.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And I will make sure to put that. I'm going to put 3 things in our show notes. Those of you listening, I will put her website, her email, and then Alexa, you made a book recommendation earlier that I will
Yes.
ask you to send me in an email so that I can also pop that into the show notes.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for spending time sharing your knowledge. I know that I definitely could have used the support as a first-time mom, and there were things that held me back. And I just want to share that, I think, because maybe, they're holding other people back. One, I didn't want to feel like I needed help taking care of my own baby.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
like, I'm mom. Of course, I should know how to get this child to sleep. I should know
Right.
how to do this. And in retrospect, I realize there are people who are experts in so many things
Right.
because we are not meant to be the expert in
Absolutely.
everything. And
Right.
we cannot be the expert in our baby's sleep and diet and muscle development and developmental skills and education. Like
Right.
it's so silly.
Right. You can't
But
have a
it's
PhD in everything.
you
It's not
can't.
possible.
You can't. And yet sometimes as a mom it feels like
Yes.
you should.
Yes.
So it was a little bit embarrassing, I think, to struggle with sleep. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first question everybody asks. Oh, is he a good sleeper? No, my kid was not. And I did not know how to approach it. And I didn't,
Right.
you know, so I wish that I would have. It would have saved a lot of heartache. It would have saved a lot of
Mm-hmm.
arguments, those
Mm-hmm.
things. And then I think, too, it was such a tender time, at least for us financially, that it's like, oh God, like, can I make an investment in someone
Right.
to help me? And sometimes those
Right.
prices feel a little scary and you're not sure, which is
Right.
why I think it's so important to have resources out there like this where you can say, okay, now I've heard from Alexa or I've heard from someone else. I know that they make me feel safe. They make me feel comfortable. Their style
Right.
aligns. And if that's true, that's when I think it's worth the investment of time,
Yeah.
money, energy, because you're getting back in the long run, you're getting back time, money,
Right.
energy by
Right.
tapping into someone who really loves and probably nerds out on solving that particular problem.
Right.
When I'm
Right.
talking to
Exactly.
people, I'm like, you don't have a degree in relationship communication, but guess what? I spend all my time nerding out on it so that I
Right.
can
Right.
make that easier for you, so that I can, make it a less painful journey, which is exactly what I'm hearing from you. And just I look back and I think, yeah, we were in a financially tight time. I was
Mm-hmm.
embarrassed and unsure of why I didn't know how to
Yeah.
do everything for my baby, but I really wish that we would have gotten personal sleep support for our
Mhm.
child because we try to, put these little boxes on him that were just made as general
Yeah.
boxes and not who he was as a baby.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's my case for getting sleep support.
Well, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Chelsea. I
well,
really
thank
appreciate this.
you.
This was
Thank
lovely.
you. All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you take a minute to help spread the word. As a small business owner, shares and reviews go a long way. So, share this episode with a friend, share it on your social media, and please leave a review if you haven't done so. This helps these messages get to more mamas, and you guys, that's how we change the world.